Okay, let's try and move the discussion with Nick Rust forward on the Jim Best saga. Next point to make, Nick. It went to an independent panel. BHA wanted to retry the case in-house. That wasn't to be. Hindsight's 2020. Could you and should you have let that sleeping dog lie, took your medicine, and just moved on?
Well, if we'd been concerned only about the reputation of the BHA and the individual people who work in the BHA, it would have been much easier to have left it. We've had 6 to 8 months of not speaking about this case and the matters around it because we were advised that the very best way to ensure we can get a fair rehearing for Mr. Best was to keep our counsel and make sure we focused on that, which is what we did. We were very determined with these allocations to make sure that this was heard, but also the appeal board said to us, you know, this case is in the interests of racing that it's reheard, and we have to take those instructions seriously. So that's what we focused on, and just, you know, we initially, through an abundance of caution, offered Mr. Best the chance to go through Sport Resolutions, an independent body that does some other work for other sports, to hear cases like this. And they rejected that, the representatives of Mr. Best. So we had to put on a panel in accordance with the rules of racing. Through an abundance of caution, again, we went outside the existing disciplinary panel and put on a fair hearing.
3 eminent independent figures. They agreed they were 2 stopping rides. They agreed that Jim Best was guilty of, quote, something that strikes at the heart of racing's integrity. And yet they suspended his license for 6 months as opposed to 4 years. What was your emotion and your team's emotion when you heard that verdict?
Well, obviously, I'm personally a bit disappointed because we feel that there was scope to give a larger penalty within the guidelines. But I respect what the panel has said. I thought that, you know, from all I've read, they've handled the case very well, with a lot of consideration, and they've mentioned in their reasons very clearly why they've gone for a 6-month disciplinary, suspension. We note those comments, and you'd expect that I'm going to look pretty hard at making sure that guidelines and penalties for the very worst offences are very clear and upped as appropriate, and there can be no pushback from people within the sport about wrongdoing and harsh penalties.
BHA constantly denied that a deal had been done with jockey Paul John, plea bargain if you will, for lenient treatment. The panel ruled that a deal had been done. They criticised the lack of clarity in the way your case was presented. They criticised the lack of clarity in the sentencing guidelines. And all this from a self-proclaimed world leader in integrity.
Well, I've never said that we're a world leader in integrity.
People in your body have.
I've never said that, and the culture of the organisation that I lead is becoming far more open and transparent. We're publishing reports, we're publishing our plans, and I am intending that this organisation is absolutely fit for purpose. They questioned the guidelines rather than criticising them, and we have to take that on board, absolutely. We presented the case and we persuaded the panel, whether we presented it as clearly as they would like or not, we persuaded the panel so that they made this decision.
Let's bring this section to a close with a few straightforward but very important questions. To many people who follow the game, BHA seem tone deaf to criticism. They just don't seem to react. They just draw a line and move on. Do you accept that? And do you even realise that people out there are looking at this organisation with a very cynical eye nowadays?
Well, Graham, I mean, there's a few things. I get told off in the media a little bit for apologising when we have made mistakes. So I find it difficult sometimes because culturally I'm trying to make sure that any organisation makes mistakes from time to time, right? I'm trying to make sure that we learn from our mistakes and we accept them and move on. And when I do that, I get criticised for apologising too much. And then other times, like today, I get criticised for not accepting criticism. We fully accept criticism. The BHA that I run is now full of people who are passionate, who care about the sport. Mr. Quinlan recognised it in his report, professional people who know about horse racing, and our motivation is here to help make this sport grow. And there's a whole lot of things we do outside of regulation that contribute to that, but we accept our main responsibility is to make sure that racing is run fairly and we have no sport without integrity.
How does it feel in a line to know that a corrupt trainer, Jim Best, will be back in the game towards the back end of next June, just 6 months away?
Well, look, as I said before, I would have liked to have seen a stiffer penalty. Mr. Best will have to, come forward again and make sure he applies for his licence. We'll make sure that he serves his penalty. And look, the submission from his QC, Jonathan Laidlaw, was his business had already suffered from 30 horses down to 13, I think he said. He's now got a 6-month ban. He hasn't got off lightly, but It's true. I would have liked to have seen a stiffer penalty.
This must have cost the BHA a fortune in legal fields. How much?
Well, we'll publish that. The truth is, it's not just
6 figures or more?
Well, it's likely to be 6 figures, but there are some practical components to that. We've had to and agreed to repay Mr. Best and also Mr. Gilligan in the other outstanding case their wasted costs. In other words, the costs that they couldn't reasonably reuse for the rehearing.
So 6 figures.
We've done that. We've done that. Yes, it will amount to around 6 figures.
Are there any other cases that may have to be reopened because of Matthew Lone's involvement on the panel?
There are 7 other cases, and as you know, I initiated a review with Ian Mill QC to look at which cases might be affected.
Is the Mahmoud Al-Zaruni one of them?
No. They had to be within the time between Mr. Lone first being paid by the BHA, and so we've looked at all panels since then that he has chaired or been involved in, and there are 7 other cases on top of the 2 live cases that were live in Best and Gilligan. 4 of those are resolved, and the other 3 we expect to resolve in the first quarter of next year. 3
quick ones to finish off, Nick. What's the one thing the BHA could have done along the line, with hindsight, that you could have done to minimise the damage of this case?
Well, had we had the judgment at the time and said we should have disclosed Matthew Lone's other paid work every time he sat in front of a panel, then anyone sitting in front of the panel could choose to object or not to Mr. Lone sitting, and that's the mistake we made.
I've spoken to more than one person who suggested that you might even have fallen on your sword had this case gone dead against you. Was that ever a possibility?
I'm judged by people in the sport. I have a wide variety of responsibilities. I've come here to try and make a difference. I'm very keen to do that. It's for others to judge my performance. I take responsibility for leading us through this, making sure that matters are cleared up and that we have a strong system in place moving forward.
Last question. What do you say to those people, and there'll be plenty out there, who say racing's integrity is not in safe hands with your team after the way this case has been handled and botched?
Well, I don't agree that the case in itself has been botched. I accept the point that I've made about Matthew Lone. I announced a reorganisation at the end of September as well, alongside the Quinlan Review, and instead of having 2 separate areas of my organisation working on integrity and regulation, they're now in one. So we're expecting some improvement. There are some new faces who've come in my executive team, and I'm confident that we have the right team to do the job the sport expects.
Nick Rust, thank you very much for your openness on the Jim Best saga. There's more to come for Nick. He's back on the hot seat for ABP and any other business later in the afternoon. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.